Hoppers is Pixar's 30th feature-length film. God, that statement makes me feel old. And it follows a young girl called Mabel who uses a piece of technology to put her consciousness inside that of a robotic, lifelike beaver. And through this bit of technology, she's able to commune with animals and help them get their habitat back. Ever since I was young, I've always had a respect for Pixar as an animation studio, and I think a lot of that is down to the fact that quite a few of my favourite childhood films are courtesy of them. The first ever film I remember seeing in the cinema was Finding Nemo back in 2003, and some of my favourite animated films of all time, like Finding Nemo, Toy Story 2 and Monsters Inc., are made by them. And even if the quality of the films themselves has dropped a little bit over the years, personally I still think even at their weakest, Pixar know how to create a very entertaining movie with a very strong thematic message at the centre of it. And this is where Hoppers comes in, a film firing on all cylinders to deliver everything you've come to expect from a Pixar film in as entertaining of a package as it possibly can. Now, I'm not going to be the one to say that this is Pixar's best film since Soul or Toy Story 4, because I think that does a disservice to the really good films that they've released over the past couple years, like Luca or Elio or Inside Out 2. But the quality of Hoppers, compared to some of those other films that some may consider weaker over the last few years, is definitely noticeable, and it definitely feels like a noticeable improvement from the moment this film starts. Compared to the likes of Elio or Elemental, which I still really enjoy those films and I think they're incredibly underrated when it comes to Pixar's back catalogue, but when you compare Hoppers to those films, Hoppers just comes straight out the gate with a certain level of confidence in the story that it wants to tell that I haven't felt or seen from a Pixar film for quite some time. And to be honest, considering this is Pixar's 30th film, I feel like that's kind of what they needed for this milestone of a movie within their filmography, because it's confident, it knows exactly what it's trying to do in terms of its style, its humour, and its core messaging, and it just kind of gets straight to the point in addressing all of those. Now, this goes without saying, but the animation here, as expected, is stunning. It's vibrant, it's colourful, and it's got a certain cartoony nature that has kind of been lacking from some Pixar films for a little while now, and I'm glad to see them bring that in full force throughout this film. One thing I also really appreciated about the animation in this film is that it carries over a stylistic choice that worked really well in Turning Red and utilises it here even better in my opinion, and that's by taking certain characteristics and over-exaggerated character expressions and a certain type of humour that you would expect to see in Japanese anime, and that's something that Turning Red did a little bit, and this film takes that and really goes for it in certain areas. There's also one touch to this film that was really more noticeable here than in some other Pixar films, is the amount of Easter eggs to other Pixar properties, whether it be their feature-length films or their short films. I know in some of Pixar's other movies, some of them are really noticeable or just hidden away in the background, but when I saw this in the cinema, there were a couple that were like really front and centre and really obvious, and I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to put as many Easter eggs into this film as possible, because it is their 30th film and they almost want this to kind of be a milestone movie that kind of pays homage in the background to everything that's come before while telling its own cohesive story and doing its own thing at the same time. And in that sense, this film works so incredibly well. I realise Pixar have kind of been struggling recently when it comes to their original movies, and that's kind of the reason why they're going back to a lot of these sequels like Toy Story 5, Inside Out 2, Incredibles 3. But when they do an original concept right, which again is what their classics are kind of built upon, is these unique concepts of, you know, what-if scenarios brought to life, Hoppers just feels like an updated version of one of those classics. Like I said at the start, this film takes its concept and just runs with it. It makes the most out of it in terms of giving you really memorable characters that you want to see more of throughout the film. And it has an emotional core that really does sneak up on you, and I feel like some of the best Pixar films are really good at doing that. There are some Pixar films that can rely a bit too much on the emotional moment, but some of the more effective ones are the ones that just kind of sneak up on you. This film does a very, very good job of establishing the thematic core right from the word go, then just letting the story play out, and then when it needs to bring it back in at core points, it really does. But you never lose sight of that. It's always something happening in the back of your mind because of how the plot plays out, and it does a really good job of making these characters lovable, likable, but also, more importantly, flawed. Even when it's the animal characters or the human characters, none of them are perfect. And again, I feel like that's something that Pixar have really tried to do with their recent output in movies, but here I think it's probably at its best to show you these flawed characters and how they can work together to overcome their flaws to, reach the goal that they're all trying to achieve. I wouldn't say that this film made me tear up like some other Pixar films have in the past, but that emotional core, and when it really came into its own during the last act of the movie, did choke me up a little bit, and the way it all kind of threads together isn't necessarily perfect, but I think for the tone that this film's going for and the certain energy that it's giving off, I think it did it as best as it possibly could. And that's another thing. I was not expecting this film to be kind of creepy in places. The majority of the movie just plays out like how you'd expect it to play out. There's a lot of hijinks, there's a lot of funny moments, there's a lot of quite heartfelt, tender moments, and it all just kind of bounces around quite nicely. But in the third act, and I never thought I'd say this about a Pixar film, but it kind of leans into body horror a little bit and has some really creepy imagery. Like, if I was a certain age, maybe, 5 or 6, and I saw this in the cinema for the first time at that age, it would creep me out. I would be unsettled because I was watching this in the cinema and I'm like, God, this is quite intense. But anyway, you're going to hear a lot of people saying that this is Pixar's best film in quite a while, and I kind of have to agree with them. Again, there have been some really good films from them, at least from my own personal opinion, released within the last couple of years that I don't think should go overlooked. But because this film has a certain style and a certain confidence to it, and has a sense of humour that I've not really seen from Pixar in quite some time, and it knows what it's doing and just kind of gets on with it, I really have to commend Hoppers, and it really felt like a breath of fresh air. The characters are all fun and enjoyable to watch on screen. The voice acting from pretty much everybody is spot on. They all fit their characters perfectly. The story is great. The central message and theme of the film I thought was really lovely and really well handled. And obviously, because it is a Pixar film, it looks the part as well. I cannot recommend Hoppers enough. I had an absolute blast with it, and I immediately want to see it again. And it works really well as this milestone movie for Pixar's 30th film. After all these years, they are still putting out brilliant original animated movies, and this is the statement they needed for said milestone. If you've seen Hoppers, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I'd love to have a discussion about it down there. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.